data. What are you trying to accomplish? Like, what is it? Why are we talking? What is the thing you want to have done? And that's, I mean, the first thing everyone has to do is become introspective. What is it I want? Like, what is it we're trying to do here?
So I've talked a lot on the podcast about how important it is for men to be involved in groups. Now, I don't think we can underestimate the tribal aspect of being among peers who are, for the most part, looking for a lot of the same things you may be looking for. And I think that's why I'm excited about today's podcast, because I get to talk with a man who's had, unfortunately, like many of us, a trauma, some tragedy in his life, but also discovered the redemptive nature of having masculine brothers around him to walk through life. So let's meet today's guest, Jonathan Deyoe. He is a best-selling author, host of the Mindful Money podcast, and he helps artists and entrepreneurs achieve their financial freedom through his expert education and coaching as a financial advisor. Jonathan, welcome to the True Man podcast.
Mike, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. Now, Jonathan and I met. So a lot of times you may, if you're a regular on this podcast, you hear me talk about my upcoming book that probably by the time this podcast is out, will be out, thankfully. That's the Rich Code, Cracking the Rich Code book from Jim Britt, and Jonathan and I met in his mastermind group, and it's just wonderful to connect with all these great people. But Jonathan, tell people, wrap some context around your story now that I've set up how we met, and talk about, some of the life events that you've gone through that have led you to understanding your purpose today.
Yeah. Well, without going into a 2-hour conversation, because I can make this pretty long, but I'll keep it pretty short. I started off in the financial planning industry, this financial sales industry, actually, in 1996. And I spent 5 years working for different Wall Street firms. And in my 5th year, after 3 different mergers and 4 different moves I made personally, working for 7 different firms, I started my own company. And when I started my own company, I asked my clients at the time, people who had purchased products, not really clients, they were customers at the time, what would they like in a financial planning firm? And they all said, more education, less product sales, more planning, simple things. So I went about to build that firm. And so I spent 20 years in that firm. And as you know, you grow a business for 20 years, it gets to be pretty big. It gets to be kind of an unwieldy thing. And I'm not the CEO. So I had decided, probably actually in 2014, I decided to sort of bring my brother on as my CEO, and we started talking. We created a couple courses together. We started working together on some projects on the side. He had his master's from Cal, fantastic, brilliant guy. And he was investing in stocks. He couldn't do it then. He didn't want to come on just then, but later. And so finally 2021 comes around, March of 2021. We're talking, he's got his last set of stock options he's vesting in. He's excited. Let's do this. Okay, great. He's going to come on January of 2022. And in June of 2021, he died. He drowned in the Pacific Ocean. And I went into kind of a deep tailspin hole, both because, he's my brother, he's my best friend. And we're 2 years and a month and a half later right now. And I was just telling you earlier that I've sort of turned a corner. I'm feeling a lot better about life. A lot of things are coming back together after these 2 years. But what I did by the end of that year is I merged my practice, because I was bringing him on because I don't know how to run a practice. I've run a practice for a long time.
Yeah.
I've done HR, I've done tech stack, I've done all that stuff. Not my expertise, not the thing I want to do. And he was going to come on and take those things on and help me expand and do some of the other educational things that I wanted to do. By the end of 2021, I had merged my practice into a larger firm, EP Wealth. So happy to be there. Great company, still work there. It's wonderful. And I took Mindful Money and I spun it towards education and coaching for people that don't have access to advice. The first 4 months after he died, I was, let's be honest, the first 2 years, I was in a pretty crappy place.
Yeah.
Slowly getting better, never great, but slowly getting better the whole time. and I think the thing we're going to talk about the most is the thing that actually dug me out. The thing that I really helped me ultimately was I found my guys. And there's 4 guys, and we hang out together. We have a regular men's group. Sometimes we eat steaks together. Sometimes we just sit around and have a formal men's group format, which I've never been part of before. Check in, how you doing? What do you need help with? This kind of stuff. And it has changed everything. He was my guy. Like, he was always the one guy I would go to. I had a question about parenting or my wife, or I always had someone to talk to, and then he wasn't there anymore. And so I had nothing. And it was during the pandemic. So my friends had kind of slipped by the wayside a little bit, and so I was building from scratch, and I found, these 3-4 guys that my brother knew as well, that I've known historically. And we just kind of came together, maybe because Dave died, maybe they saw that need, but I think all 4 of us are benefiting a lot from this group of guys.
I have my COVID story. A lot of people I talk to have a COVID story. Some more difficult than others, right? For sure. COVID in and of itself didn't change my life, but very indirectly, it had a huge impact on my life. I'm sitting here in Atlanta, Georgia today. Can't honestly say that would be the case had things here in the United States not gone sideways and around the globe. And it was a tough transition for me personally. But you had to deal with not just COVID, but the death of somebody that you dearly, dearly loved. How did you get through that time prior to connecting with these other guys in your group?
Well, the timeline works such that getting through COVID was easy because he was there. Like, my friend group declined, slowly declined over 2 years of just being alone in my basement, right, with my family. But we would meet. He lived 20 miles away, so we would meet 10 miles right between us, and I would take my kids. He would bring his kids. The 2 younger kids would get on their scooters and they'd scoot around this parking lot, around this, this play area. And the 2 older kids and the 2 of us would kick a soccer ball around on this, massive soccer field, keeping our distance, staying masked up, all the things you had to do at the time. And so it wasn't until June of 21. So we're pretty much out of it by then. This is 18 months into it. People are feeling more comfortable. We've all been vaccinated a couple of times. We feel pretty good. I'm still nervous. I'm kind of an anxious person to begin with. So, but we were coming out of it. I had traveled on a plane a couple of times by then. I had just gotten back from visiting my parents in South Dakota. And then he died. So it wasn't, I had all the support I needed getting through the pandemic. But the alignment of the end of the pandemic with the declining of the friendships, and then the loss of the brother, that stack. I was in my basement after he died for 3 weeks, just crying by myself, basically. And then I finally asked my family, "Hey, I'm not doing well. Can you help me out? Can you check on me occasionally?" Because I'm kind of a workaholic. I would come downstairs early, and I still do early every day. I'm here. I'm up and at it before anyone else is awake. And they checked on me for a bit, and their family, they're on to do their own things and stuff. And I'm glad that they do. They shouldn't have to worry about me all the time. And so I needed a place. And so these guys kind of stepped up. "Hey, Jonathan, let's go for a walk. Hey, Jonathan, let's go do this thing." And hey, how about we do this on a regular basis? Hey, that's a great idea. And it wasn't, one of the 4 of us is sort of launching a business in creating men's groups, but we're his guinea pigs. And I've known him for 20 years. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And he has a map, has a model, and he leads the group. He's also a member of the group. It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
So did you know all the guys in the group prior to this group setting up? Because this is a question I get a lot. I mean, guys will say, "Oh man, we're so great at isolating, us guys. I don't know why we do this. We just shouldn't do it, but we do when things go the wrong direction." And so a lot of guys will say to me, "Well, okay, this is just a great idea, this group thing. Where do I find my guys?" But in your case, they were kind of there, I guess.
Yeah, there were. So, I mean, there are all kinds of things that guys do, right? And so I play sports. There's a bunch of guys I meet every Sunday, and we play soccer together, right? There's a group of about 4 or 5 guys that I've skied with throughout my life, and so there's those 4 or 5 guys. These guys were guys that my brother, these guys, a couple other guys, and myself, we would play. I'll admit it. We would play D&D together. So one of the guys was my dungeon master. Everyone else had a character. We would play this game together 20 years ago. And some of us still play today, but it's these guys were close before we were married. You know, we got together on a regular basis every week before we were married and played a game. And then, you know, I got married and Gary got married and someone else got married and someone else was seeking, and we kind of went our own ways, and life pulled us apart, and then Dave died. And I don't know if they recognized the need or what, but they sort of just coalesced, and now we meet on a regular basis to discuss what we're all going through. And one of the most beautiful things I learned in this conversation was just how grateful I can be for the relationship I had with my brother. And we all know siblings and sibling rivalry and siblings who fight all the time about everything. My brother and I weren't like that. Like we were each other's support structure. We were there constantly supporting each other, helping each other out, and talking and communicating and working together. And parent, you know, we have separate kids, separate families, but hey, Dave, what do you think about this with my son? Hey, Jonathan, what do you think about this with my son? And we just help each other out all the time. These guys, in the first session where I was, first couple sessions where I was a complete mess, like I would get in, check in, how are you doing, Jonathan? I'm miserable, but fall apart, right? They would say, Jonathan, the relationship you had with your brother was a special relationship. My brothers beat me up. My brothers locked me in closets. My brothers right? This kind of stuff. So I learned that it's a unique relationship, and therefore it's going to hurt uniquely when he dies.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I'm the oldest of 3, so I've got 2 younger brothers. So you just kind of made me feel guilty there about locking them in closets and stuff like that. So,
sorry.
No big deal. No, actually, it's interesting. I think the older we get, and we start to see, our parents are getting older and going through some things, that I think it's kind of brought us closer in a different way. In fact, I've recently talked with my younger brother, and we're working on some business stuff together. So we start having different discussions than we normally would. But it's really kind of cool, I think, to have that there. But let me ask you, what did having that group of guys mean to you in terms of getting your life back and getting in touch with your heart?
So I'm a pretty introspective guy. So I was pretty in touch with my heart. The thing that I think the thing that helped with this group was context, was realizing that, hey, this is a normal part of life. And I knew that, but before Dave died, I don't think I ever experienced a trauma. Like, I was raised very poor. We didn't have any money, but I was a kid, so it didn't really bother me. Like, here's a stick, there's a hill, go have fun. That was great. There was no problem with that. But I lived a pretty blessed life, like pretty incredibly blessed. I have great kids. They get along. My wife's fantastic. I did go through a divorce early on, but even that doesn't seem to measure up to any kind of real pain. So Dave dies, and I experienced the first real traumatic, painful thing in my life. And these guys say, yeah, we've been through some traumatic stuff. And so I could see, and you're on the other side of that. You can survive this. And every single one of them has horrific stories. And the more I was open about it, and it wasn't just the men's group, I tried to be closed off and manage it myself, this trauma.
Yeah.
Can't do that, right? So when I was open about it, suddenly people came out of the woodwork. Oh, Jonathan, it's really impressive how open you are about this. I lost my brother. I closed down and didn't tell anybody, and I feel like I don't have any support. There's my first support right there. somebody else comes out of the woodwork. Hey, yeah, I lost so-and-so, and this is how it's helped me, or this is something I read, or this is something I listened to, and just when you're open about it and you sort of hold this thing in community, which is what the men's group is, if you hold it in community, it's lighter. It's your load becomes lighter because you have people helping you.
Well, yeah. And I think the interesting thing is one of these things that happens, and you experience this, is all of a sudden, when you carry this stuff around, it feels like you're the only one in the world that's ever gone through it. Now, rationally, that's not true, but it's what we tell ourselves, right? We tell ourselves this. And when somebody puts their hand up and says, oh, wait, I've gone through this too, it's almost like you can breathe a little bit. Like, oh, right? That support system from that community is in place. And without saying what I think it is, what do you think that secret sauce is for the group that makes it so successful?
Wow, it's a great question. I don't know that I know the answer to that either. I'll take a stab at it though. There's this who wrote it? Robert Bly wrote many poems, but there's a book. I think Robert Bly is in the book, or maybe it's called The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart.
Yeah. In fact, you recommended.
Yeah.
You recommend, and I got curious. I got to say, I got curious. And so okay, if you're on camera, you can see it. Yep. It's a book called The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, poetry. Now I got this before I went on my trip. I haven't had a chance to dive in, but I kind of poured through it and I thought, what an interesting book, a book, what can we call this? It's kind of a masculine, book of poetry. And there's some well-known people in here.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I remember from that, and what the thing that I think the secret sauce is, and you said this, we tend to isolate.
Yeah.
Men tend to isolate. And I know so many male clients, male friends whose friend group is really their wife's friend group. And they have some old friends from college or high school that they stay in touch with, but they stay in touch very loosely. But the things they do every week are with their wife's friends. And I think that's very normal for men to do. And I don't know why that is, but I think that's normal. So to intentionally create a space for men to come together and talk about stuff that annoys, bothers, hurts men is, I think, unique. I think it's something that historically we would have in a tribal setting. Yeah. That in the Western world, we just don't have. I think the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart is just a reference to that old tribal setting where the male village elders would come together with the young male children and say, okay, this is what it means to be a man. And not a man, the cult that media tells you about. This is what it means to be a man, right? This is a heartfelt, realistic thing. I'm not talking about hitting on women, not talking about, bagging the next one or anything like that. It's just, how are you successful as a man? How can you be honest? How can you persevere? How can you deal with hardship? How do you deal with your kids? How do you deal with a spouse? How are you doing these things? There's no book for any of this. So speaking about it live is the best way.
Yeah.
That is until your book comes out.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, of course. You know what I think is interesting about that is I agree with you 100%. And I often use the word intentional with that, because everything that you mentioned in terms of having a conversation, I always joke commonly, I don't get to golf too much anymore, doggone it. I wish I was golfing a lot more, but it wouldn't be unusual for me to go play a round of golf. I come home and my wife goes, well, what did you guys talk about? Like, what do you mean? What did we talk about? We talked about how many putts dropped or why that ball went in the woods. That's what we talked about, And I think a lot of women are like, because they'll go shopping, and in the middle of shopping, they're having these intense discussions, right? And guys aren't always dialed in that way. And so it really does require some, level of being intentional about going deep with these conversations. And what I've found is, in some respects, we're all curious. It just kind of takes that guide to step in and go, just start the conversation.
Yeah.
Do you have a guide in your group, or does everybody just kind of share equally?
We do have a guide. Jay is our guide. And Jay is, he's also a participant though. He's the youngest of the group.
Oh, wow. Now that's interesting.
Which is interesting. It brings its own. He's also, I would say, the most embodied, the least cerebral of the group. And so he's like all about, so Matt, stand up, move around, to get this energy out kind of stuff. And we're all the other group members are all kind of, well, let's think about this and analyze it. Right?
Yeah.
Which we need. We need that. We need that sort of motion energy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that can help a guy. I always say to people, what I really do is help guys get out of their head and into their heart. Because, we tend to overthink things. And sometimes, I don't know what time your group meets. I've got a Friday group now, just like I did a couple of years ago, and we meet pretty early in the morning. So, to get up and move around, sometimes other than the coffee, a good cup of coffee is pretty important when you have early morning meetings. But, finding different ways to get the blood going, when you have these meetings is a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, we actually do it in the evening, and we do it over a steak.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's another thing. Okay. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start. If anybody's interested in this, please do reach out to me, Mike@truemanlifecoaching.com. We are going to start a men's steak night. We'll do it once a month because I don't need my wife getting on me. And we'll find a good steak restaurant to go to and drink some probably, you're out in California, right, Jonathan? Yeah. So we'll drink some nice Napa punch you in the mouth cab, which is some of my favorite, and have a nice steak. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me.
I recommend it. It's a good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's man, I just can't say enough good things about it. Being involved in these groups. I think we talked about this a little bit when we had our initial conversation. The other thing too, that I like to mix in, and I'm doing more of it, and the way my schedule worked this year, I'm doing 2 of them in October. So by November, I ought to be feeling great, which is retreats, just absolute getaways on a weekend where you're able to just have, longer, more intentional, maybe have 2 steaks instead of 1, right? On that weekend. And because one of the things, and I don't know if you guys talk about this in your group, we're not very good at just kind of stopping to smell the roses, so to speak, if I had to put an analogy to it. We're not very good at stopping sometimes and just pausing and putting on the brakes, similar to what you and I were both gone about the same time over in Europe in different places. And you came back and you're like, man, I just felt I felt good. I felt good. And it's like, I didn't check email. I didn't check phone. And I did something kind of similar, but not to the extent that you did. It just really felt good, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I mean, anytime. I say that like I've done this a whole bunch. It's the first time I've ever done that, right? And I will never do it again. I think when I go away in the future, it'll just always be, I'll actually take a whole break. But I mean, frankly, this is the first vacation I've had since I have not been at the helm of the company. So one of the reasons I think that women can run companies too. I don't want to take away everybody. So women run companies. I'm sure that women that run companies run into the same problem. So people that run companies are primary breadwinners, or they've got a lot on their shoulders. And so if you've got a lot on your shoulders, it's hard to break away. And so this was literally the first time in 25 years when I didn't have that responsibility. So it's the first time I think I could have done this. Now that I've learned the lesson, I wish I would have done it earlier. I wish I would have just said, you know what? Things can wait. Nothing's going to die. Nothing's going to break. Nothing's going to fall apart. and just taken the time and done it. And I didn't, I was too afraid, whatever, too anxious, probably. I remember I was with my wife in Japan. This is just before the pandemic, 2018, 2019. And we got one of these travel Wi-Fi things you put in a backpack. So we always had access. So we're on trains and we're, in our little huts or, for the evening. I always have access. I'm checking email every single day. I'm on a totally different time change. So I'm going through and answering emails at 2 a.m. in the US, making sure I'm working every day, like every day I'm full. It's full time, even on vacation. So this was the first time I've ever done it. I came back. I was refreshed in a way I don't ever remember being refreshed. Like it works. Take a break, people. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Now I'm going to put you on the spot because I this is the first thing that kind of comes to my mind because I've been thinking about this a little bit myself, which is short of taking off and going on expensive European vacations. Travel right now is expensive, people. If you look into it, because everybody wants a piece of the action right now. COVID's over and everybody feels like it's time to travel. So the costs are pretty incredible. How do you feel like you can help yourself achieve the same feeling that you got from going away now that you're back home? Is there something that you've thought about since you've been back where you go, okay, I'm going to give myself windows of time where I don't do whatever. And instead I go walk in the woods or I journal or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's two things one of these things I used to do like religion before Dave died. And I had a morning routine, and my morning routine was you get up, you meditate, you work out, you stretch, you cool down, you read, you write, and then you shower and go to work. Right. So I would get 3 hours in before the rest of the family woke up, and I would get all this personal stuff and this personal time.
Yep.
And when Dave died, that kind of went away. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm making sure that's back in place. That's not a surprise. It's not something I'm doing because I got back and I feel like it's something I've been trying to get back ever since Dave died. Being away for 3 weeks sort of enabled me to bolt on. I had the meditation to bolt on the exercise. And so now it's actually pretty easy to put those things in place. And it's only been a week. So we'll see if it sticks, but I feel pretty good. It's going to stick. So that's the first thing. The second thing, it's not scheduling blocks of time to break away and go for a walk in the woods. It's ending my day earlier. Like ordinarily, historically, I have always just said, here's my Calendly link. You can schedule until 7 p.m. and 8 a.m., 7 p.m. I'll be there. Right. I don't do that anymore. I've now tightened my Calendly, and this is technology, right? I've tightened my Calendly. First meeting's at like 9, last meeting is at 3. Right. So I've shortened my day. It's tightened up. I've also taken Fridays off. So it's like Mondays through Thursdays, 9 to 4 is kind of the time frame. Everything else is my time.
You just made me think I maybe need to go into my calendar and straighten that thing up a little bit.
You bet. You should probably do that.
Listen, I commonly do that, especially on the tail end of a day. I've gotten to the point in my life where I'd love to still run, but I can't. I just, I pay the price every time I do it. So a lot of times I'll go for, I do a lot of stuff inside the house, elliptical, bike, stuff like that. That's low impact, but I do like to get out and go for a walk. 'Cause I feel like a flower. Like I need the sun, I got to get out of the office. And if I can get out at the end of the day and do it, and I'll bolt out of here and just drop everything. Because it's so important. I think John Eldridge, he wrote a book called Get Your Life Back. And, I don't mean to over dramatize it, but there's little things like this that help you get your life back, or at least maintain it. So you don't have that insanity of everything that's going on around you. Yeah. So, I just think these things are so critically important in our lives. But I was just curious, what you'd come up with since you got back, because this has been top of mind for me to really develop a decent plan and have it in place even though I can't be gone. I can't be on vacation forever, right?
I'm curious, have you done any resistance training? It sounds like you're walking and elliptical, and I got to tell you, and just maybe this is just me, but I read a lot of stuff. You got to get your weights in. You got to get
so
training.
I have oh shoot, now I can't. I do resistance. I don't use weights anymore.
Bands.
It's what's that machine downstairs?
TRX.
No, that's not what it is, but it's I do resistance type of training, because at a certain point, and I had a doctor say this to me once, and it's definitely true. You know, the older you get, your muscles contract, they don't expand, and so it really becomes about flexibility. I'm not so much concerned about strength as I am, you know, flexibility and things like that. And really the reason for that, you know, my concern is that I want to live a long life. I got a lot of things to do, man. I got a lot of people I want to impact. I've got some big goals, and I do it as much. It's going to sound funny. I try to stay healthy, not just for myself, but, you know, my kids. My son's 20, my daughter's 18. You know, someday, way off in the future, you know, I want to be a grandparent. I want to travel the world. I want to impact lives. And I've got some great business things going on that I have no doubt is going to allow me to travel the world and really help people build a business for themselves. And so, you know, people should have these big goals, just like the financial goals. I'm sure you find yourself talking to your clients all the time about, you know, what are your goals, right?
Oh, it's the beginning of every conversation. You know, what is it? I had a conversation with somebody that was never going to be a client today, but just someone sort of a pro bono thing. And I was like, okay, data. What are you trying to accomplish? Like, why are we talking? What is the thing you want to have done? And that's, I mean, the first thing everyone has to do is become introspective. What is it I want? Like, what is it we're trying to do here?
And I know, before I even ask this, I know you guys are having those discussions in your men's group as well.
Oh yeah. That's the beginning of, I mean, I don't remember the order because I'm not the guy running the place, but it's one of the big first steps is you check in, you know, what are the things you need help with on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, how big is it? And whoever's got the biggest thing, you know, that person goes first. Right. And then we go into depth on whatever that thing is for that person. Right. It's one of the, what do you need help with? That's what are we trying to do? What do you need help with? That's the big question.
Yeah. And I'm just going to kind of put a period on this men's group stuff. I do think it's critically important. If somebody's looking for a men's group, how would you encourage them? Or if they wanted to start one, how would you encourage them to get that thing going so that they can have a crew like you do, where you can check in and have that great community?
You know, I never even thought about it before I needed it. Right. So I don't even know. I wouldn't even know where to begin, except, and this is interesting, now that I'm looking back, there's a couple men that I know that talk about the groups that they're part of. One is just, you know, one guy's an older guy. He's got a retired men's group, right? They go have lunch at a specific place once a month and they chat about whatever the issues are. But find other men, ask them.
You know, I've said that so many times and it sounds so simple, right? Hey, do you want to, but it really is, right? Hey, you want to hang out and have a bonfire? Hey, you want to hang out and go for a steak? And what I always say to people is, have a couple of questions you wouldn't ordinarily ask somebody in your pocket and bring it up and see what happens.
Wouldn't ordinarily ask those, like, touchier questions.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it could be anything, right? Like, you know, how's everything going with your kids? You know, how's everything? You know, how's it really going with your kids? You know, something as simple as that. I mean, you know, we live in a challenging culture. challenging culture. I mean, divorce is really at all-time highs now. And, our children, for example, especially with these crazy smartphones we're talking about, they're under, there's just a lot going on in their lives that, way more than when I was their age. Holy cow. I mean, the things they have access to are insane. And so, a lot of us, we live, unfortunately, different lives than we do in public. And so, sometimes asking that question, something other than, so what was your golf handicap again? I mean, you got to go a little deeper than that.
Yeah, I think, and what I found is, if I'm vulnerable, and I think this is what happened in this particular circumstance, I was vulnerable. I didn't have a choice. I mean, it was on my, wear your heart on your sleeve. I was tears on my face. It wasn't heart on my sleeve. It was tears on my face. Right. But if you're vulnerable, it gives people permission to be vulnerable. Like, everybody wants you to be vulnerable, and everyone's terrified of being vulnerable, but everyone wants to help you. Everyone wants to be there for you. It's just, they don't know how, and you're not asking. But if you just say, hey, dude, I'm having a tough go with my son. How do you deal with this with your son?
Yeah.
That's huge. You just create a bond when you do that.
Well, you do. And I found more times than not that, once those walls come down, you can just kind of keep the conversation going, because we are all having those challenges. We're just all having those challenges. So Jonathan, as we begin to wrap up today, tell people, how they can find you. Tell them about some of the education stuff that you may be doing now, and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. I mean, the best place, and you can see everything that we do, is to go to the website, which is mindful.money. You'll find all of my social media there. You'll also find the quarterly boot camp. We do a financial independence boot camp every quarter. And we have a group coaching program for folks that don't really have access to an advisor, or don't have enough money for an advisor. Or, this morning I talked to a woman who is 10 years here from Cuba. And so doesn't really know the financial landscape and just wants some basic understanding. And she brought up, oh yeah, I found out this guy who has this program that's teaching me how to invest and how to trade stocks online with these charts. And I was like, oh my God, throw that away. Like, that's the first thing you need to do. Yeah. So it's shocking when I talk to some people about the things that they're looking at as this is advice. No. Be careful, beware, buyer beware.
Google does not have all the answers. Shocker.
Right. Talk to a human. Humans are good.
Yeah, and we'll put that information up on the website. But I think what you're doing is so critically important, because I like to think that I know a thing or two about that financial landscape out there. But I'll tell you, I don't know that things have ever been any more complicated in our financial world than they are now. There's just kind of some things going on, and I'm not going to go into details, but there's things going on in the markets that just are almost irrational, but yet things keep on going. But I mean, I'm looking at things going, I don't get it.
I would invite people. The book comes out September 20th. I would invite people to take a look at my new book, which is Mindful Investing. We talk about investing in craziness and keeping it as simple as possible, so that you don't have to be worried when election cycle, war, whatever, climate change. You don't have to worry about those things if you invest the right way. And that's what we're trying to teach people.
Well, there you go, Jonathan. It was great talking with you today. I'm glad to see you so excited coming back from your trip and refreshed. And we can't wait for the book to come out, and everybody check that out. So thanks, Jonathan, for being on the True Man Podcast.
Mike, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You bet.